30,000 visitors for every single resident. This isn't the plot of a movie. It's the harsh reality suffocating some of Europe's most beloved destinations. In the first part of our journey, we explored 10 places on the brink of collapse. Today, we'll uncover more cities, and even entire European islands, while asking a crucial question. What is the invisible price that local communities pay when their home becomes a dream destination for the entire world? Let's continue our investigation into how the siege of mass tourism, often short-term and barely profitable for locals, is wiping out homes, erasing cultures, and pushing residents to take to the streets to defend their identity. Welcome to this new report by Amazing Europe. Number 1. Lisbon, Portugal. Every single day, more than 3 people are forced to leave this once accessible gem. A city full of authentic charm, now being voraciously devoured by a kind of tourism that's methodically eating away at its soul. In historic neighbourhoods like Alfama, where the population has plummeted from 12,000 to just over 3,000, speculation is rampant and unstoppable. In some streets, 75% of apartments are now controlled by platforms like Airbnb and big investors, turning homes into mere commodities. But at what cost for the locals? Rents have skyrocketed beyond €1,200 for a modest 2-room apartment, an unaffordable figure compared to the average salary barely exceeding €1,100. Lisbon has become off-limits to its own children, who are now being pushed into a form of forced exile. Stories like that of Alcina Lorenzo, evicted without mercy along with her family to make way for yet another alojamento local, are the tragic everyday reality of a silent yet brutal expulsion. The narrow, charming streets that once pulsed with local life now buzz with noisy, polluting tuk-tuks, while one geographer bitterly remarks, "Life here is disappearing." And while the mayor downplays the issue, claiming the city is far from over-tourism, bold grassroots movements are fighting back with determination, even proposing a referendum to stem the tide of short-term rentals. Will Lisbon manage to save itself before becoming yet another empty shell built solely for visitors? Number 2. Mallorca, Spain. Imagine being forced to leave your paradise island, once a symbol of peace and simplicity. That's exactly what's happening to many locals, as Mallorca is now suffocating under a tidal wave of tourism that threatens its very existence. With almost 18 million visitors in 2023 and fewer than 1 million residents, the ratio is 12 tourists for every single inhabitant, an unsustainable pressure. Places like Calo de Moro, once a hidden cove, now attract up to 4,000 people a day thanks to social media, turning into crowded selfie sets and causing erosion and chaos. The housing crisis is dramatic. Rental prices have skyrocketed, forcing many residents to live in camper vans or leave the island altogether, while it's estimated that 90% of tourist rentals are illegal. Even water resources are collapsing, worsened by cruise ships that heavily pollute Palmer's Bay. Despite timid measures to curb excess tourism and protests under the slogan, "Mallorca is not for sale," the island risks losing its identity forever. Transformed into a consumer product that devours itself, it will take much more than catchy slogans to save this wounded paradise. Number 3. Kotor, Montenegro. How much wealth does a tourist really bring when they spend just €40 a day, yet leave behind environmental damage and a wave of locals being forced to flee? Kotor, the medieval jewel and UNESCO World Heritage Site, is suffocating under the weight of cruise tourism. Imagine nearly 500,000 cruise passengers a year, with peaks of 5,000 people, flooding a town of only 22,000 residents. The average spending per cruise tourist, estimated at just €40 per day, seems laughable compared to the true cost. Skyrocketing rents are literally driving locals out of their homes. The environmental toll is alarming. A single docked cruise ship can pollute as much as 2,000 cars and trucks in 1 year, and each passenger produces up to 3.5 kilograms of waste per day, threatening the region's fragile marine biodiversity. The narrow alleys of the old town, once guardians of history, are now permanently clogged, and UNESCO has already sounded the alarm. But there's a big problem. Tackling over-tourism means confronting Montenegro's own economy. How can a country where 22% of the GDP relies on tourism and 1 in 5 workers is employed in the sector face this challenge without putting its future at risk? A vulnerability that makes every decision about managing tourism flows even more critical. Number 4. Prague, Czech Republic. This architectural jewel of Europe is now facing the consequences of overwhelming success. With over 8 million tourists registered in 2024 and nearly 25 million nationwide, the Czech capital is quite literally under siege. The Prague 1 district, the historic heart of the city, has seen an exodus of residents, while the urban fabric transforms into what many now call a fake Disneyland, with local shops disappearing in favour of tourist-oriented businesses. The explosion of short-term rentals, with around 14,000 units on Airbnb as early as 2019, has further fueled the housing crisis, sending prices soaring and making it nearly impossible for locals to live in the city centre. Adding to this is the rise of alcohol tourism, with crowds of rowdy bachelor parties. The infamous beer bikes, pedal-powered vehicles where groups drink while touring, are a common sight, contributing to noise and degradation. There are also countless organised pub crawls, often centred around heavy drinking. After years of complaints from locals, night tours have finally been banned, but issues persist. Authorities are trying to fight back, introducing roles like the night mayor, a special figure tasked with handling nightlife-related disturbances, and proposing laws to regulate Airbnb and night traffic. But these efforts face powerful economic interests and a local governance long oriented toward unchecked growth. The shift toward more sustainable tourism, though widely hoped for, remains a tough battle ahead. Number 5. Rhodes, Greece. What's life like on an island where there are 20 tourists for every single resident and water is running out? Rhodes, a Mediterranean tourism giant for decades, knows the answer all too well. Its medieval city, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is suffering. Ancient stones are visibly worn, and historical buildings are being converted into shops, slowly eroding the place's authenticity. The paradox? Some areas, like Lindos, are now so crowded that even tourists describe them as hell on earth. This illustrates the daily pressure on residents who struggle to find housing due to the boom in short-term rentals. The environmental impact is severe, from waste management to water use. In fact, 75% of the island's annual waste is produced during summer alone, straining systems already running on the edge. Water resources are also under immense pressure, as Rhodes faces increasing drought risk. Local authorities recognise the situation as a threat to both quality of life and tourism sustainability, admitting a lack of specialised personnel to maintain service standards. In response, the South Aegean government has launched Collapse Rhodes, an ambitious project aiming to transform the island into a model of sustainable tourism, with a declared focus on environmental protection and greater participation opportunities for locals to preserve what's left of the island's soul. Will they succeed? Number 6. Cinque Terre, Italy. This isn't a single city, but 5 tiny villages in northern Italy, all part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Once isolated hamlets of farmers and fishermen, today they are under siege. With 3.4 million visitors in 2023 and only 4,000 residents, these stunning places are choking under pressure. The impact on daily life is described by former park president Donatella Bianchi as a social problem. The real challenge is making it possible for locals to still live and work here. Imagine the train platforms and tunnels of Manarola packed with tourists, where residents must fight for space, especially during the intense period from April to September, which accounts for 85 to 90% of all tourism. The worst congestion happens on about 20 critical days per year, peak weekends, spring holidays, and festivals, when crowds become almost unmanageable. Tourism is now the real business, and as soon as an elderly local passes away, their house almost inevitably turns into a B&B. This makes it nearly impossible for young people to find a home. As Bianchi herself declared, "We don't want fewer tourists, we want to manage them sustainably." This also means preserving the identity of a region whose uniqueness lies in its terraced landscapes, narrow strips of farmland carved from the mountains, supported by kilometers of dry stone walls. But as agriculture is abandoned in favor of tourism, those walls go unmaintained. When they collapse, it's not just a loss of heritage, it increases the risk of landslides. This neglect was even one of the causes behind the landslide that closed the famous Via dell'Amore for an astonishing 12 years. Number 7. Étretat, France. Remember those iconic cliffs from the series Lupin? Étretat, in Normandy, has become a symbol of how fame can turn into a curse. Its tiny population of just 1,200 residents must now handle 1.5 million annual visitors, including 800,000 day trippers who often contribute little to the local economy. The impact of fame, especially post-Lupin, is everywhere. Constant trampling accelerates erosion of the fragile chalk cliffs, forcing the town to close off access in certain areas. Locals report the disappearance of around 400 kilograms of pebbles from the beach every summer day, along with rising pollution and litter. Parking has become a nightmare, and real estate pressure has led to 1/3 of the local population vanishing in 10 years, triggering the closure of schools and shops. The hunt for the perfect Instagram shot leads to reckless behaviour, often resulting in dangerous and costly rescue missions. Fire department interventions can cost €900 to €1,000, while helicopters run up to €3,000 per hour. In response, starting April 2025, the municipality is cracking down. Anyone entering restricted areas will face a €135 fine and may be required to reimburse rescue costs. But will these reforms be enough to save Étretat? Number 8. Malaga, Spain. Imagine being unable to live in your own hometown because rent has become a luxury only the wealthy can afford. This is the harsh new reality in Malaga, once a gem of the Costa del Sol, cherished for its sunny climate and low cost of living. Now it's at the centre of a perfect storm of over-tourism. The number of tourist apartments has skyrocketed, from just 850 in 2016 to over 12,000 today. In some central neighbourhoods, up to 25% of homes are listed on Airbnb. This short-term rental boom has drained the housing supply for residents, sending rents soaring. Finding an apartment in the city centre for under €1,200 is almost impossible, while the average Andalusian salary is only €1,600. Malaga has been transformed into a hub for digital nomads, and the locals now feel pushed out of their own city. Frustration is everywhere. Stickers reading, "This used to be my home," or "Smells like tourist," are plastered on walls. Tens of thousands have taken to the streets chanting, "Malaga is for living, not for surviving." They're protesting the loss of neighbourhood identity, where hardware stores and local shops have been replaced by bars and souvenir stands, turning the city centre into a theme park. In response, the local government has announced a 3-year freeze on new tourist licences across 43 neighbourhoods. But the measure has been met with a mix of hope and scepticism. Can it really reverse the tide? Number 9. Lofoten Islands, Norway. It might surprise some of you to see the Lofoten Islands on this list, but this fragile Arctic paradise is suffering from over-tourism far more than you'd expect. Located above the Arctic Circle, this stunning Norwegian archipelago has just 25,000 residents, but is now overwhelmed by nearly 1 million visitors per year, with a 15% surge from 2022 to 2023. In some iconic beaches, the ratio between tourists and locals can reach a staggering 30,000 to 1. The environmental toll is severe. Famous hiking trails turn into mud highways, and waste management, including human waste, is a serious concern. There are reports of public defecation, even in private gardens and near drinking water sources. The Instagram effect has created massive pressure on specific hotspots, often leading to disrespectful and dangerous behaviour. Narrow roads are clogged with campers and rental cars, parking is nearly impossible, and public toilets are shockingly insufficient. Locals describe themselves as foreigners in their own home, struggling to find housing due to the explosion of short-term rentals. Their peace and traditions are being violated. In one shocking case, tourists camped and left trash in family cemeteries, showing utter disrespect for sacred spaces. The Norwegian government recently approved a 3% tourist tax on overnight stays. But will this be enough to save this fragile archipelago before it's too late? Before we reveal number 10, if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next videos. It costs you nothing, but it means a lot to us and really helps our project grow. And just a quick reminder, we've launched a new channel, America vs. Europe, where we compare European countries, the United States, and Canada on a wide range of topics. Thank you so much. Number 10. Florence, Italy. Is Florence still for the Florentines? It's a bitter question that echoes through the narrow streets of this Renaissance jewel, where 10 million tourists in 2023 seem to have taken over a city of just 360,000 residents. A staggering 95% of these visitors crowd into the tiny 5 square kilometers of the historic centre, creating an unsustainable density. Daily life for locals is deeply affected. The constant noise of tour guides shouting through speakers becomes the soundtrack of the city, while endless lines form at the Uffizi Gallery or the Duomo, often worsened by ticket scalping. The illegal resale of entry passes at inflated prices. Keyboxes, small lockboxes placed outside buildings for handing over apartment keys to tourists, are popping up everywhere. They've become a symbol of a city that has lost over 12,000 apartments to short-term rentals, pushing rents out of reach for locals, especially students who are being forced to leave. Historic artisan workshops, the soul of Florence, are closing down, replaced by restaurants and souvenir shops. Florence is turning into a theme park where, as Bishop Gambelli has warned, the city is undergoing a slow suicide. The city government is trying to respond, banning new Airbnb licenses in the UNESCO area and tightening regulations. But the battle to save the soul of Florence is far from over. There are many other places in Europe seriously damaged by overtourism. Write in the comments other cities you know to be victims of this phenomenon. And we'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences on this situation in the comments below. And if you haven't already, check out part 1 of this video to discover 10 other European destinations overwhelmed by overtourism. That's all for this video. See you next time.